You can totally see that. That is awesome. Hey everyone, we are doing like this off. Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar on how to build customer loyalty and build raving fans. We're very excited to have this conversation. This was all inspired because behind the scenes of the one thing, not only are we always trying to figure out how do we help you or help create even better content to help you live the book at a higher level. As we scale this business, we're asking the question, what's the one thing we can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary. And part of that is looking at our business and taking a step back and asking, what does it look like? Which you can see behind me, much of that work. And one of the things we have been studying is how do we engage better with you? How do we form a deeper, more meaningful relationship with every single one of you so that ultimately you become a raving fan and you get to a level of mastery on the content that you can turn around and empower the people in your world to go on the journey to discovering their one thing and living a life of extraordinary results. And part of that, Jay looked at me, he's got a little bookshelf up here, and he handed me this book and said, you should really read this. I really enjoyed it. And it was all about how Lady Gaga turned her fans into evangelists. And I tore through it. And what do you know, the next week, Jay was having drinks with the woman who is going to be with us here today. And the three of us sat down, had a great time, and knew we had to bring this woman to you to have this conversation. So we're very excited about that. How many of you have read her book, Monster Loyalty? If so, put yes in the questions box. That'll just give me a quick sense. Okay, very good. So Jackie is the best-selling author of 4 books, including Monster Loyalty, which we're going to be talking about today. She is a keynote speaker, she's a TEDx speaker, best-selling author, and just an expert when it comes to the customer experience. And so today we're going to go through lots of different areas as to how Lady Gaga did this with her business and creating those fans, and how you can specifically apply it to what you do in a professional sense. Now, I'm curious, how many of you have read The One Thing before? If so, put the number 1 in the chat box and not do the number 2. Okay. Excellent. So the vast majority have. For those of you who have not, like, hi, Chelsea, thank you very much. The one thing's the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results. And it's the idea that every single day we all wake up with 24 hours, yet why is it that some people get these extraordinary results, and then there are so many of us who work hard all day, and yet we look up at the end of the day and wonder, did I even get anything done? And it comes down to a very simple fact that everything that's on your to-do list can be divided into one of 2 groups: your most important work and everything else. Most important work, everything else. And what we don't realize is that without the training, without going through the book or listening to the podcast, many of us have gone through our life doing the things that are not as important, and we wonder why we don't have time to do the things that matter most. And so it's, how do you flip it on its head? How do you get clarity on what matters most? And how do you start to knock those dominoes down first and achieve extraordinary results? So that's the idea there. And when we look at our business, one of those dominoes, that lead domino, that if we continue to knock that down over time would lead to extraordinary results, is building customer loyalty with you. And that is why we are very excited today to have Jackie Huba here with us, which, Jackie, I'm going to send you the webcam request and then also take you off of mute. So let me go ahead, send webcam request and unmute Jackie. Jackie, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, well, I can hear you now. I sent you the webcam request.
Can you see me?
No, not yet. Wait for it. I'm sending it one more time. Did it come up?
It didn't.
Okay. Well, while we figure,
I'm gonna share it.
Yay! We got you. Awesome. So why don't you give us a quick rundown before we dive into your presentation today? How did this idea for customer loyalty come about, and Monster Loyalty?
Yeah, I was just a fan, like anyone else, back in 2009. And, I've been studying customer loyalty for, gosh, over 15 years. And so I'm always looking for amazing examples of any brand or company who is creating these evangelists. but I just became a fan of the music from Gaga, and then I realized that she's this crazy performance artist. But it's when I started looking at how she was interacting with her fans and the fan sites and at the concerts, and she was doing some things that no one else was doing. And I really just became obsessed with studying this. And over the course of 4 to 5 years, I was so amazed at these strategies that she was using. And then I saw companies were also doing similar strategies without wearing a meat dress. So I thought, you know what? I have an entire book of material here to help companies understand how to create loyalists like she is. And she's such a fun person to talk about because there's so many stories that most people have never heard of that are in the book. And that's why I decided to write it. It's just a fun way to think about loyalty. And she's just doing these amazing things that I think people should know.
Cool. I'm curious for the people who are on here live, how many of you are Lady Gaga fans? If you are, say me. And if you're not exactly a fan, go ahead and put not so much. I'm just curious to see what it looks like at the beginning, and then we can do the poll again at the end.
Jeff, can you report that to me? Because I can't see that.
Yeah, totally. We got lots of me's, and Christine was all capitals with an exclamation point. Very nice. All right. So vast majority, I'd say 99% me's, and I've got a few not so muches.
All right. And I'm sure there's some little monsters in that group as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let me do this. I'm going to pass the presenter over to you. That way we can go ahead. She prepared a very nice PowerPoint deck for us. I'm very excited to see it. Okay, 1 second. And folks, as we go through this, if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the questions box because we want to make this interactive for you. We're definitely going to save time at the end for us to go through Q&A, and I'll be looking at these as well. And I've got Kaylin over here who will send them my way. If she thinks there's something really good, we'll handle it right at that time. So Jackie, I cannot see your screen quite yet. Are you looking at the other computer? There we go. Boom.
There we go. How's
Every
that?
time. You are good. Let's roll.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, you guys. I know that there's a lot of people who are familiar with Gaga, but I did want to just flip through really the history of the amazing accomplishments she's had if you're not familiar with her. I mean, again, I mentioned she came out in 2007, and this is really a quick montage of all the crazy things and amazing things she's done over the last over 10 years. Everything from the meat dress to doing a jazz duet album with Tony Bennett, to being in American Horror Story, winning the Golden Globe for being in American Horror Story, the TV show, and then maybe the Super Bowl could have been one of the biggest things that she's ever done. And 27 million albums, 146 million singles, and currently 6 Grammys. And in terms of her influence on the media, it's been huge. This was Time's 100 Most Influential People a few years ago, and you see her on the cover next to a former president. And I love this particular sort of honor. Forbes always does the world's most powerful celebrities. This was a few years ago, but you can see that she is above Oprah Winfrey on this list. And I think if you best Oprah Winfrey on any list, there's really something amazing going on there. But I really know her as someone who has an amazing following, 76 million on Twitter, 56 million on Facebook, and someone who has built this worldwide throng of passionate fans. She calls them little monsters. They call her Mother Monster. And it's really more than the music that people are attracted to. And I'm going to tell you how she's able to build this passionate fan base and what lessons we as businesses can learn from that. As Jeff mentioned, this was a book that came out a few years ago, and it really goes through the 7 strategies of how she's creating loyalty for the long term. And these are strategies that businesses are using today. And I'm going to show you some of those businesses, but we're only going to go through a few of those today because I know we only have a little bit of time. So let's delve into the very first thing when I think about what is the thing that she does. But before I get to that, I do want to define loyalty for 1 second, because I think in marketing world, we throw around this term loyalty. But what is it really? This is something I developed a model with my former co-author of really looking at what is loyalty when you look at customer behaviors. No longer can we say that someone just saying they're satisfied is a form of loyalty, because they could switch at any time. Now, retention, if someone is buying from you over and over again, that kind of tells you a little bit about loyalty. But, as with an airline, they've got so-called loyalty programs that are really points programs, and you're sort of locked in. So is it really a loyalty program, or is it just, you're buying, but it doesn't say a whole lot about really loyalty? The top three levels here of customer behaviors to me say a lot more about are your customers' loyalty. One, do they refer you? Do they really put their reputation on the line to tell someone else about what you're doing? The next level, higher level, is evangelism. Now, this isn't just a referral. This is when your customers absolutely love what you're doing. They feel compelled to tell everyone they know about you. And my first book was called Creating Customer Evangelists, and this is kind of a term that we coined on really getting to that raving fan level. And then the highest form of loyalty is called ownership, and that's where we see customers who literally will help the company. We've seen local bookstores go out of business, and customers just jump in and help that company survive, that business survive. And so it's these heroic feats that we see some customers go to help that business succeed. And that is a very hard level to get to. But that is the holy grail to me. When we look at loyalty, we kind of need to realize, like, how do we move our customers up this ladder?
I'm curious for the people who are on here live, where are you? When you think about your customers, what would you rank them at? Like, are they just satisfied? Are you in the retention phase? Are you in referrals? Are you in evangelism? Are you in ownership? I'd be really curious about that.
And I think, Jeff, that's a really great question, is do we know where we are? And I have some things coming up that will kind of help you to
Cool.
know where your folks are.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm looking as it comes in. Stephanie says that we're in retention. Elsie says mostly retention. Um, Rodriguez says I'm not even on the ladder. Rodrigo, it all begins with self-awareness. All right, well, let's keep moving, Jackie.
Yeah. So that first one that I wanted to tell you about, this first strategy that Lady Gaga does, is really to focus on what I call the 1%ers. And that really is the 1% of your audience, which is those folks who absolutely love what you're doing. So let's just think about that. We think about like the universe of our customers, right? We have new customers, existing customers, and advocates. In one of my books called Citizen Marketers, my co-author and I looked at an entire customer base, trying to isolate those key advocates and what percentage of the fan base or the customer base really is these advocates. We studied Microsoft and Intuit and a bunch of tech companies, and what we found, which we extrapolated to others, is that over and over again, it was about only 1%. These are the most engaged customers, the evangelistic ones. They're super influential, even though they are a very small group. And these are the folks that we really need to embrace and create programs around. So I just want to introduce you to what a 1%er is like. And for Gaga, I think people aren't really sure. They think that a lot of her fans are teenagers or 20-somethings, but I want to introduce you to Amber Brown. And as of this picture, which was a few years ago, she was 38 years old. She worked in insurance. She's from Southern Illinois, and she's a huge Gaga super fan. And the stats I have for you up on that screen are, and those of you who are little monsters will know that the Monster Ball was the first tour. Well, Amber went to 9 of those. The second tour was called the Born This Way Ball. Amber went to 5 of those. And if you were first in line on that tour, you got to meet Lady Gaga. Now, Amber camped out for 10 days in front of that arena. There were, she had her tent, she had her sleeping bag, there were thunderstorm warnings, and she braved it all to meet Gaga. And when I asked her why she would do such a crazy thing, she said, I've never been more inspired by someone in my life, not just by her music, but by her message, and I had to meet her. And this is one thing you should know about 1%ers. They can be a little crazy, a little nuts. And for some, when we look at them, we might think their behavior is irrational. But this is really the emotional side of connecting with customers. They might do things that seem irrational, but you know what? Love and emotions are irrational sometimes. And so I really try to caution folks I speak with and companies I work with that these are your best customers, even though they're kind of crazy. Now, you don't have to be Lady Gaga to have crazy fans like this. I want to introduce you to Ron Susi. And Ron loves, obviously, Costco. He loves Costco so much, he buys everything he can. I know, Jeff. And his wife made him this shirt. so that everywhere he goes, people know he loves Costco. What I love about Ron and his wife, they live in Southern Virginia, is every time they travel, they have to go to the Costco in that town. They have to because
It's because they want a slice of pizza. It's the best.
he loves Costco so much. And this is a discount retailer. So my message to everyone who's listening is, you don't have to be Lady Gaga level of, stardom to have crazy fans who will love what you do. And that's my message. And so I just want to share with you what I'm a one percenter for. Just so you know, I'm also a crazy person, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I was born in Pittsburgh. Everyone who's from Pittsburgh, a lot of us are just born this way. I'm going to the Super Bowl here on the left, my custom Converse shoes. That is the tattoo of their logo on my ankle. And I run the Pittsburgh Steelers fan club here in Austin, Texas, where over 200 to 300 people come out for every game and we watch it all together. And again, one percenters, we're kind of crazy. We're volunteer our time to do weird things like this for brands that we love. And that's the kind of behavior we need to think about, which is how do we engender that?
I'm curious for the people who are on here, what are you a one percenter of?
And that's my next question.
Oh my gosh. You go then.
Yeah, so I would love to hear, and maybe you can tell me what's in the chat box.
Yeah, absolutely. Cody says the Broncos.
Okay, well, give me like a commercial brand or a company, not your company, not like a sports team, but like a brand that you absolutely love, you tell everyone about.
Okay, so Morgan says Taylor Swift. I got lots of people who said the one thing. That is so nice of you guys. Flattery gets you everywhere with us. Paul says Subaru. Ann says Dunkin' Donuts. Rent the Runway, says Morgan. Cindy's one thing. Instant Pot, says Kim. Trader Joe's, says Monique.
Nice. And I love how you said Insta Pot.
I'm actually curious. For those of you who genuinely feel that about the one thing, please email me, jeff@theonething.com, because behind the scenes, we're asking the question, what are we doing that's actually creating that type of engagement? And we very sincerely would love to have a conversation. So please email me if that's you.
Awesome. Well, the question I have for you guys is, do you know who your one percenters are? And if you're not paying attention to who your one percenters are, I just want to tell you, you're not alone. There was some great study that just came out less than 2 years ago by Forrester asking the top chief marketing officers in the country, what are your top objectives? And look at the difference here. It's huge. 53% of these CMOs are saying that their top objective is acquiring new customers, and only 10% are focused on retaining customers or loyalty. And to me, this is really out of whack. And one of the main reasons are some of these things. For example, we all know conventional wisdom. It's 5 times cheaper to keep a customer than to get a new one. And here's a study I don't know if you've seen. When we look at a customer base and we look at the folks on social media who are referring, evangelizing about brands, it's about 4.7% of an entire customer base. So whether it's 1% or 4.7%, I mean, it's a small group, but they're very, very vocal. And those customers, these 1% or 4.7%, they're out there trying to get you new customers. So they are trying to acquire customers for you just because they want to share their great experiences. They would love to have more people experience the same thing they have. So it's so interesting to me to see CMOs focus on acquiring customers when, you know what, current customers, evangelists, one percenters, they are also trying to acquire customers. So it makes sense to focus on our current customers. And so when we look at lifetime value, I think we have to recalculate lifetime value, not just what the customer is spending, but also what the customer, how much they are referring. And what is the value of the customers who are referring? And I think in that way, that might help us justify spending more time on current customers.
Well, Jackie, as you said, that just the fact that 4.7% of your customers generate 100% of the referrals. I want to let that sink in with people, because talk about the number one lie of productivity, that everything matters equally. What about your customers? Who are your one percenters, and how do you treat them differently?
Exactly. And we're going to talk about some ways to do that. And that's my main point here. What is so, to me, what was so striking is even in the beginning, of Gaga's career. This is Troy Carter, her manager. And this was an article in Wired where, this is the time when everybody was chasing social media likes back in like 2011, 2010. And even then, they were saying, they'd rather have 1 million diehard fans than have 54 million Facebook likes, because how easy is it to just like something on Facebook? But the diehard fans are the ones who are going to buy those tickets right away, the concert tickets, buy the merchandise, buy the albums. They're the first people who are going to try and recruit more Little Monsters into the fold. And so that's why they know it's very strategic to focus on those Little Monsters. And she does almost everything she can to focus on the Little Monsters. And if you're not sure how to find them, and this is one of the things I mentioned earlier that we were going to do, here's one very specific tactic if you don't know if you have these 1%ers. And that is a methodology called Net Promoter. And I don't know how many of you guys use this, and I'd love to do a poll as soon as I explain what it is to know how many of you guys are focused on this. This was the methodology that came out of Bain and Fred Reichheld, looking at surveying your customers with 2 questions, and it gets to loyalty. And the first question is, how likely are you to recommend to a colleague or friend? So you would send this out to your customer base, and what you will find is that when people answer 9 and 10, those are going to be your promoters, your evangelists, your 1%ers. 0 to 6 respondents are your detractors, and the passives are your 7s and 8s. And this score is very harsh. So it takes the percentage of promoters, 9s and 10s, minus the 0 to 6, which are your detractors, and you get an NPS score. The average score is 22. Someone like Southwest has like a 68. So this will take your audience respondents and try to segment them into who your promoters are. And then you want to ask them that second question, like, why did you give us this score? And that'll tell you ways you need to improve, or, it'll tell you what if someone is a promoter, they'll tell you why a promoter. So I'd love to know how many folks are using this methodology.
We've got a hand people. Paul is, Cindy says they do it. Cody says he uses it at an organization he previously worked at. Rodrigo has used it. Says his is 16.9, which is why he's not on the ladder and why he's here on this webinar.
Awesome. Well, it's a great score, and I've seen it now being used by the smallest of companies all the way to the largest of companies. So it's becoming a very accepted methodology to use, and I love it because it's super simple. It's really just 2 questions, and that's all you need. So you just benchmark it at the beginning of your use, and then every so often you want to ask your customers the same question again. See if you can get the score up based on the feedback you're getting. I absolutely love it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so just to end this section, asking you guys, do you know who your 1%ers are? If you're a smaller company, you might know by name who your 1%ers are. Or maybe when you look on social, you see the same people posting content or responding to your posts. Those are your 1%ers. If you're doing any kind of social listening, you might see some of that. But I think the key thing is try to find out who they are, because these are the folks we want to really nurture and build a program around.
Amazing. Well, let's go into the second one. And what I'd like to do is, for those of you who have questions around this first one about finding your 1%ers, go ahead and submit them in the questions box, and we'll table them for Q&A a little bit later on.
Okay, cool. All right, so the next strategy when I look at how Lady Gaga is building this fan base is really about leading with values. And for those of us in the business world, the reason that this really makes sense is because when we look at how people buy, people are really buying from sort of a logical way of evaluating us. And so if we're selling products, they're looking at price, they're looking at functionality, they're looking at our experience, they're looking at all these sort of analytical things. But there's also the emotional side for why people buy. And that's what this particular tenet is really about. Because if we could connect with our customers on our values and what we believe in, those customers are much more loyal and much more connected to us. For Lady Gaga, she's always been very, very attuned to who our audience is. And from the very beginning, when she couldn't even get she couldn't even get a gig anywhere. She's from New York City. Her first gig was a gay bar, and then a second gay bar, and then the San Francisco Pride Parade. And that was the only groups who would book her in the very beginning. And she developed this audience in the LGBT community. And so she knew that when if she could ever get a big platform, she would try to use that platform to advocate on behalf of LGBT folks. And so she has spoken at equality marches. and Don't Ask, Don't Tell. She's advocated for that and just has really been a huge advocate there. And, you know, in her connecting with her young fans, she also started to understand how bullying has become a huge problem for kids of all stripes, but also in the LGBT community. And so her next album after her first one was actually a message to fans. The entire album was a message to fans to say, you know what, we may be all different, but we were born that way and we should all accept everyone. And I want to play you just a little snippet of the lead song called Born This Way, so you can see the values coming through in that song if you're not familiar with it.
My mama told me when I was young, we're all born superstars. She rolled my hair, put my lipstick on in the glass of her boudoir. There's nothing wrong with loving who you are, she said, 'cause he made you perfect, babe. So hold your head up, girl, and you'll go far. Listen to me when I say I'm beautiful in my way, 'cause God makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't have yourself in regret, just love yourself and you say I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way.
And so just to show you this, this was a way for her to really connect with her audience. And that was actually backstage at the Madison Square Garden when her and her backup singers were just warming their voices up. But if you Google that video, it's a really awesome video. And so what she decided to do is that she wanted to change the culture. And I don't know how many of you guys know this, but she actually started a foundation in 2012. Its whole idea was an anti-bullying type of mission, but it was really helping people be more brave, helping people accept everyone, and really encourage everyone to love one another, even and express your individuality. And she launched this with Oprah Winfrey at Harvard, and Deepak Chopra was there, and she told all the students in the audience, you know, this is not just a charity. This is a movement where I would love for all of you to really go back to your schools and let's all help eradicate bullying and be more accepting of everyone. But you know, values are not something that we just talk about. When your customers, you're trying to show your customers your values, you really need to take action. And so one of the things that she did, and I love this, is for the Born This Way tour in the US, outside every arena, there was a bus called the Born Brave bus that would show up, and kids who were under 25 could apply to come on the bus. Gaga would often be on the bus, and she would have counselors on the bus. So that if anyone needed to talk to anyone, they were right there. She wanted to demystify counseling for these kids to know that they could get help. And so again, the whole thing here is not just saying what your values are and putting them on your website, but actually showcasing them. And how does this work for business? Well, it's not just a warm and fuzzy thing. This is some great research if you haven't seen it, from Millward Brown Optimore and Jim Stengel, who was the global marketing officer for P&G for a number of years. And the research they did was to look at companies that led with values. They looked at hundreds and hundreds of companies, and they narrowed it to 50. And they looked at the financial performance of those 50, and they were able to see, when they charted the financial performance over a number of years, that the Stengel 50, the ones that led with purpose or led with their values, outperformed the market by 400%. So it's not just a feel-good kind of strategy, it's actually a great business strategy. And one of my favorite companies who leads with values and does this so well is Method. And I bet there's a lot of folks who know about Method and who use Method. But from the very beginning, Eric Ryan and Adam Lowry founded Method on this idea of creating a happy home revolution in this cleaning market. And they came out with these green cleaning products for the very first time that were good for the environment and good for, you know, pets and family and all of that. And they used great design, but there was really a purpose behind what they were doing. And just to close on this idea about connecting with customers on emotion, there was a great study that was done back in 2011 looking at the customers of this segment, which is green cleaning products. Because after Method came out, there were a number of other green cleaning companies, but then also Clorox and really big companies started adding these so-called green clean products to their portfolio. Well, during the recession, consumers started to cut some of these products out. They were more expensive. And what they found was that for Clorox and the others, they were actually losing sales in this particular category of green cleaning, but Method was not, and some of the other folks like Method. And it's because if you believe in the environment and you believe in this green cleaning, you would cut something else from your budget because you're not price sensitive on the things that you truly believe in. And so that's the idea here, that if you're connecting with your customers on the emotional level, they're not price sensitive. And so that gives you an advantage. And so for you guys, like, how do you show the values of your company? And besides putting it on your website, you know, how do you connect with customers in that emotional way? That's really the idea here.
Well, the idea that you just said there, Jackie, that if someone's really emotionally invested in your organization, they're no longer price sensitive. When things happen and they got to go on a budget or whatnot, that's not one of the options that goes. And I actually thought back to my wife and I as we looked at our finances, and we've been going on this journey to building wealth. And a lot of that has to do with really developing the habit of developing a lifestyle to match a budget and interrogating every single thing that we spend. And there are various things that we choose to keep spending money on for various reasons. We believe in the brand, we're emotionally invested in that product, and it's not one of the options. I never thought of it that way. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, and so I think too many of us think we have to have the lowest price or we have to keep up in features, and you know, we have to do what we need to do to have customers consider us, put us in the consideration set. But in terms of really standing out and really building that loyal fan base, we have to do things that connect on a different level. So that's what this one's all about. So let's go to the next one. This next idea of how Gaga connects with and builds loyalty in her customer base is the idea of community. And I know in business circles and marketing circles, the word community is, you know, used a lot. But the idea here is really building community among your 1%ers. I already talked about how 1%ers are kind of crazy and they have this irrational love for a brand or a company. And here's the thing, they love to connect with other 1%ers who are also crazy. So being a Steeler fan, you know, what I love is that we have so many people who come out and want to watch the games with us all together. They could watch them at home. They could have the ticket on DirecTV, but it's so much more fun to connect with other crazy people who love what you love. And that's really the idea here, is creating that bond between the 1%ers, because when you do that, it actually builds that bond even tighter with you. And for Gaga, she has known this from the beginning. She actually created an entire community around the Little Monsters. And what was so crazy about this, it started as a website. She could not find the platform that she wanted for this online community, so much so that she decided, you know what, her and her management built an entire company called Backplane that would actually create this community, a very visual type community where these fans could post their artwork, which is what you see here, and so many other things. And if you were a little monster, you knew where to go. And so, you know, immediately there were about 1 million folks in this community, even though she's got, you know, tens of millions of folks around the world who are her fans, who, you know, follow her on social. It's the 1% that came here because they knew she would probably be here and they could connect with other fans just like themselves. And what was amazing is in the beginning, she really was part of the community, and she would encourage people to talk about things that they had issues with and get support. And I remember there was one, I particularly screen captured this conversation because a young kid from Phoenix had posted his bullying story. And you could see the other little monsters jumping in, and you don't have to read all this, but Lady Gaga was in that conversation, you know, commenting and saying, stay strong and stand up for yourself because you're amazing, be brave. And I think that is what I'm trying to get across to everyone, is thinking about like connecting your 1%ers, but also being part of that community, being a member of that community, being a great community manager. I cannot believe she was taking her time to do this. And that's really how she nurtured them in the very, very beginning for a number of years. And that's the idea, is finding a way to put one percenters together. And I want to show you a business example of how this works. And it has to do with one of my favorite brands, and that is Mini. Um, I don't know how many of you are Mini owners out there, but I love this brand. And I had a Mini for a number of years. And when I moved to Austin, I actually walked into a party, didn't know a lot of people, and met someone who told me she was the head of the Mini fan club of Austin, which I thought was just crazy. And I had been looking, I know, Jeff. And I was like, what is that? And she said, oh, we have about 700 people in our fan club, and we, drive to the back roads to Lockhart to get barbecue. We have this big train of minis, and it's so fun. And I had to invest, as someone who studies loyalty, I really had to investigate this. It was amazing to me. And also I was in the mood for looking for a new car. And so now all of a sudden Mini was back in my mindset. And what I realized is if you go to Mini's website, you will actually see a list of fan clubs across the country. This is in the US, and they have them in Canada as well, of over 100 fan clubs. They call them owner clubs, right? Of these Mini owners, these Mini one percenters. And you can just put in, the state, and you'll find all the ones in your area, because Mini wants people to connect together. They want to keep that enthusiasm high. And these are not run by Mini. They are run by one percenters. One percenters run these fan clubs. And that is similar to what this behavior that I've been sharing with you from before. One percenters really will do anything to keep that enthusiasm high. And what is so smart about Mini is that they know that the best salesperson for a Mini is another Mini owner. There's so much to talk about. There's all of these things around customization and just such commonalities that Mini owners have together. And Mini has actually won many Polk Awards for repeat customers because they have a great product, but they also keep this community together. Here's one more thing.
While you were talking, Jackie,
Yeah.
Kim Watt just posted in here that we just got back from our first Mini takes the States with over 2,000 other Minis.
Well, that is a great cue, because guess what? That's what I'm going to talk about.
Boom shakalaka.
That's awesome. So thank you for that tee up, because to me, this is a quintessential example of how to do that. So you have the online directory of pointing people to the clubs, but Mini Takes the States is a trek that happens every 2 years. And I'm so glad that you just got back from that. It's amazing. This is from 2014. Most of my pictures are from that. It is a cross-country trek from one side of the country to the other, over 2,000 miles, and there's all these stops along the way. And these stops are like mini reunions where everyone who is a Mini is welcome to show up, be part of the party, or you could drive the whole thing if you want. So on average, 900 Minis will show up. People bring their kids and their pets, and it's like a big picnic, like a big party. And everyone is just talking about Minis and what they love about their Minis, and how did you customize your Mini, and which model do you have, because there's all these different models and makes and different ways to make it so individual for you. And here's what's crazy. There's even the one percenters of the one percenters, 900 people who drove the entire thing 2 weeks. They took off from work to drive through the country with other Mini owners. And I don't know what car you drive, but would you take 2 weeks off to spend with people who also own that same car? Because I don't know too many people who would do it.
That is super cool.
It's amazing. And so if you remember, I said I was looking for a new car. And after I did all this research, and I thought, what am I going to buy? You know what I bought?
A Mini.
A Mini. I bought the Mini Coupe in 2012. But guess what? I didn't just get this cute little car. I got 700 new friends in Austin. And I don't know how often that happens to you. You buy a new car, you get new friends. And that's the idea here, is how do you build community amongst your one percenters? How do you connect them together? Because building that bond of putting them together also connects them to you even a deeper level. And so I'd love to hear if anyone has anything that they're doing that is this idea of connecting one percenters together.
Yes, I'd be curious for the audience, and I can tell you, Jay and I a little over a year ago at the time of us recording this, that we were sitting down, we were asking the question, what's the next lead domino for the one thing? And we realized we had done time blocking mastery, we had created the Living Your One Thing membership, and the one thing we hadn't done yet was provide a way for the most engaged fans to come together and form relationships with one another. And the One Thing Couples Goal Setting Retreat was our first event, which is coming up around the corner. So if you guys are interested in that, go to theonething.com/training and you can learn more there. And then this year we did the Reset Retreat, and we're just keep asking the question, how do we continue to do it more and more and more? And Kaylin over here is talking about how do we do little pop-up events as we travel around the country and do corporate training. So there's lots of ideas that we have. That's what we're doing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I have another one that might take a few minutes. Jeff, I'm wondering if I should go through that one or if you want to go to questions.
You know what? I want to talk about generating something to talk about because I think that's really important. And
Okay.
folks, if you have any questions so far, start putting them in, because that way at the very end we can start doing some more of those. What? Yeah, we'll do it at the end. So start submitting questions.
Okay, cool. So we'll go through this one quickly.
Yeah.
This is one that I think is really, really important, and that's about generating something to talk about. And here's the reason why this one is so important. We talk about one percenters who love us and they love to evangelize us. After a while, they run out of things to talk about. So we have to keep coming up with things in our business that give them reasons to talk about us to the network of people that they want to refer us to. And I think Lady Gaga is probably one of the best word of mouth marketers that we've ever seen, definitely in the music industry. And if I were to ask you the number one thing she's ever done, every time I ask this to my audiences in my keynotes, they always say the meat dress. And there's a whole story behind that that I would love for you to read in the book. But since you guys know about that one, I don't want to tell you that story. I want to tell you a story about her perfume that you may not have heard of. And I don't know why most pop stars have perfumes. It's just part of something they do. And Gaga was actually approached to do a perfume. And so she was kind of looking out into the market, and she was like looking at, all the perfumes out there by Britney, Hidden Fantasy, Royal Desire from Christina Aguilera, even Beyonce had a perfume called Catch the Fever, actually called Heat. The tagline was Catch the Fever. Katy Perry had a perfume for people who like cats. And I'm kidding there. I do know that her fans are called the kitty cats, but to me, it just cracks me up. And even our friend Justin Bieber had a perfume at the time that could make you smell just like his girlfriend. It was called Girlfriend.
Oh, I think I got Bieber
I
fever
know.
from that.
Do you have Bieber fever from this, Jeff?
Oh, fever, totally.
But what I love about Gaga is she really creates stories behind the things that she does. And so she said to Cody, look, if I'm going to do a perfume, here's what I want to do. I want to do a perfume called Fame. And Gaga was a student of Fame. She studied Andy Warhol. And she said, Fame is a very seductive thing. But it can also be a dark thing, kind of scary. And I want this perfume to be black in the bottle and spray on clear. I want people to be almost afraid to put it on. And they told her it couldn't be done. They said, can you come up with something else? And she said, you know what? That's my idea. And if you don't want to do it, forget it. And then they realized, oh my goodness, this is Lady Gaga. And so they put their scientists on it. And 6 months later, they came out with a patent pending formula of this first ever black eau de parfum that is black in the bottle. It sprays on clear. You can see like the gold monster claws here. And it had never been done before. And I do keynotes and I actually bring this out and spray it on people. And I'm sorry I can't spray it on you today, but it actually smells great and it's unisex. And one of the things that she did to help market this, again, Lady Gaga does nothing small. She partnered with Stephen Klein and they got $1 million of budget and they created an 8-minute movie about the perfume. And the special effects of this movie will rival any horror or thriller or sci-fi movie you've ever seen. And you can go to YouTube and find that. This is actually a shot from the 1-minute trailer of the 8-minute film. If you only have a minute, you can watch that. And so this thing was launched into the world, the perfume, this crazy movie. And this perfume became the fastest selling perfume after Chanel No. 5. 6 million bottles in the first week, 30 million bottles in the first 6 months. And I love this quote from the chief marketing officer of Coty. She said, Gaga was really behind the biggest innovation in the fragrance industry in the last 20 years. She gave people things to talk about. She gave her fans something to talk about. It was different. And that's why I think it was so successful. And just to show you a quick business example of really how this works is one of my favorite examples is this company called Innocent from the UK. I don't know if you've heard of it. They make smoothies and drinks and lots of other products. And they're a really quirky, fun company. They have a great brand and they've been spreading throughout Europe. But one of the things that they do that is so fun and that creates a lot of word of mouth is that every year they have a campaign to help the elderly in the different countries. It started out with elderly who couldn't pay their electric bills, and in the winter it was very cold. And there were a lot of issues there. It's now expanded to just support an organization called Age UK, which is everything to do with helping the elderly live better lives. And their idea was they were going to ask customers to knit little hats for their bottles. Yes, I'm not kidding. I know. And so they provided this template, and they had grandmothers and kids and everyone knitting all these little hats that they would send into the company, and they would put the hats on the bottles and then put them into stores. And that's how you would see them. And they, since 2003, there's been 6 million hats that have been knitted, and they've raised over 2 million pence for this charity. And this is just something simple. One, I love that it showcases their values on helping the elderly live better lives. But it was a fun way to get their customers involved and to send something in and then to see them out in stores everywhere. And it generated so much publicity, and you can imagine on social media, the pictures. And so it gave their customers something to talk about. And that is the idea here. The idea here is pushing ourselves creatively to go beyond what is an average type of thing that we do to something really fantastical. And is it something customers will talk about? Because that's really the final arbiter. Do we give customers things to talk about? We need to, so they will keep evangelizing us to their friends and family.
When you, and I'm talking to you who's listening to this, think about everything that Jackie just went through, whether it be getting clear and focusing on your 1%ers, whether it be leading with your values, whether it be building a community of those 1%ers or generating something to talk about. You look at those 4 points and then you contrast that or compare it to what you're focusing on in your business. How many of you have an area of opportunity? We do. Our hand is raised. It's actually the single reason that I hired Kaylin, because we needed somebody who woke up every single day thinking about you and building engagement with you. It's why she is our community manager. And one of the 4 things she was hired to do was engage the community, create results and relationships with you. So what's the one thing out of everything that we talk about, what is the one thing that you can do such that by doing it would make building customer loyalty easier or unnecessary? I would love to see those answers in the questions box. And I got a few questions that came in throughout. This is a great time if you have any questions for Jackie before we wrap up to go ahead and submit those in here. And I would love to see your feedback on what your one thing will be. While we wait for those answers, Jackie, question came in from Chelsea. She said, what would someone be considered a 1%er if they take regular maintenance to retain, or are 1%ers or are 1%ers self-sustaining by nature?
Ooh, well, I think, are they self-sustaining from nature? I think what is tough about today's environment is that there's so many things going on. There's so many things for customers to be attracted to. There's so many choices, not only in the category that you're in, but where they need to spend their money. And so I think that's why my last tenet in this particular webinar about generating something to talk about is so important. We need to keep those connections going. I see too many companies who just think that my loyal customers will just be there for me, but they don't really do much to connect with them, to show them that we're in to make you successful as a customer. And we have to keep working on this, just like relationships in real life, we have to keep working on relationships with our customers. So we really need to put a lot of effort behind connecting with those folks as much as we can.
You know, Chelsea, as Jackie was talking, I was thinking of the FM Alexander quote that was in the one thing. People do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. What would the habits be that you or your business would have that if you acquired those would make staying in relationship and engaging those one percenters easier or unnecessary? What would that be? I would think on that. Another question came in from Kim. Any recommendations for building loyalty and community in a B2B market? Do you have any case studies from there?
Let's think. It's easier to use consumer examples, so I usually use those, but B2B, this absolutely works as well. You know, the first thing I would do in terms of a tactic, by the way, is net promoter. Because I think for sure in the B2B world, net promoter is still a super, super important thing to do. To give you a B2B example, when I was living in Chicago, this is one of the best examples, especially for something that was very complex. We were working with a telecommunications company that sold telecommunication services to commercial real estate buildings. We talk about very specific, right? And so in all of these buildings, there were the folks who were the engineers who were in charge of telecommunication services. And those are the folks that they had to sell to. And so what they would do is they would go around the country and literally just have dinners that they would put together where they would say, hey, we'd love to invite you to a dinner. Our president's going to be there. Please bring anyone else you know who also does what you do. And this would be a great way for y'all to connect and hear from other people in your job with the challenges that they're dealing with. And so they would host these dinners at like steakhouses, and there were no salespeople there. And what would happen is that their customers who loved them would just talk about how amazing they were to the other people who were not customers yet. And it was just, but you could tell that the way that they did it was really in a way that it was not salesy. It was just a way to get those folks together to talk about the challenges of the job, right? And so I see a lot of companies putting on sessions where they'll have speakers and invite customers to talk about the customers' issues. And it's not a sales meeting. It's not a sales type of event. And I think customers can really sniff that. So for B2B folks, I think it absolutely works. And there's actually a case study in Monster Loyalty about Aruba Networks, another tech company who actually built an entire community called the Airheads, because they were wireless networking engineers, and built conferences around that, built levels of sort of VIP levels, which are the one percenters. So there's absolutely ways to do these things in a B2B environment. They're just a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. If someone wanted to go out and explore other options, what would you advise them to do?
Say more about that, Jeff.
Well, oftentimes it's not knowing the answer immediately, it's knowing how to search for the answer. So you're a researcher as well. So how would you go about exploring what are other options for doing that in the B2B market?
For exploring what other tactics might be out there?
Sure. Or and what would work for B2B, or what you could do?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, there's lots of, first of all, get the book, because there's more examples in there that I'm now forgetting. But I think there's a lot of loyalty publications out there who are specifically talking about B2B, and you'll see a lot of, I don't know if I'm answering your question, Jeff, but there's a lot of stories out there. I write a column for Forbes as well, and I've got some examples of that on my Forbes column too, of how B2B companies are doing this. And it's actually, I think B2B companies have actually a greater, it might seem like it's easier in B2C, but I think with B2B, a lot of times they're more personal one-on-one relationships, and you're not dealing with millions of customers, you're dealing with tens of customers sometimes. And so it can be much more personal because you know exactly the names of the people that you're dealing with. And so that might be helpful.
And I think one thing you just said there, Jackie, I remember early on a coach challenged me to read the one thing, and for every chapter, I had to write down 10 deadly questions. And what was interesting about that is that inspired me when people asked, how do I learn the one thing at a deeper level? I challenged them to read a chapter and write down 10 ways you can live each chapter. And one of the things I then did for your book, Jackie, is I read the book, and for every chapter, I wrote down 10 ways that we could implement each chapter. And when I did that, I ended up with this mind bank of things that we could do that would make building customer loyalty easier or unnecessary. So for any single one of you, I mean, to show up for a 1-hour webinar, you've been armed with a foundation. Now the question is, do you buy into the idea that you should be focusing on your 1%ers, that 100% of your referrals are going to come from a minority of your total customer base, 4.7%? And do you care about this enough to go on the journey to becoming a master of building customer loyalty?
I love that idea.
Yeah. So Jackie, where can people learn more about you?
Well, I actually have a slide.
Yeah.
Tee me up, Jeff. I'm on Twitter, website, Facebook. I have Instagram too, but she's not on here. So yeah, I have a newsletter. Sign up. Love to hear, especially in Twitter, love to hear what resonated for you, and any other further questions you have that I could answer. You can post them there as well.
Awesome. Final question comes from Samantha Root, who asked, what are some technology resources you implement so that you can reach out to your 1%ers?
Yeah, I actually, I know this sounds very old school, but I love email marketing. I love email marketing, and I think when you look at the assets of what you're building in terms of followers, to me, email is still super effective. And so if you're not gathering emails from your customers or even people who were just interested, um, MailChimp or whatever service you want to use, I still believe that that is one of the most effective ones, because that email goes right into their email box and they can respond quickly and easily. So not so much on social. We know that the reaches are not there. So I love email above everything else.
Yeah, and Mickey, I'll second what Jackie just said, because I have a feeling you and I are probably the same. I love the new shiny tech toy. I just want another tech platform to play with. And the challenge is sometimes keeping it simple is just so much easier, because as you scale, before you know it, you have duct taped a bunch of things together, and it's just not as scalable as you'd like it to be. So keep it simple. Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this month's One Thing webinar. Every month we feature a best-selling author, and we'll have another one coming up in September. We'll be sure to let you guys know about that. If you are not yet on the email list, go over to theonething.com. That's with the number 1 in the URL. Sign up, click on the free stuff page, sign up for something, and we'll make sure that you get notified on all future webinars. And this will go out on the One Thing podcast later, which if you're not subscribed to that yet, please make sure to do so. And I would strongly encourage you to pick up a copy of Jackie's book, Monster Loyalty. The reason that she is here is because I read the book first and built an entire model around it and said, okay, this helped me. I think this can help you. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you. And we hope you have a productive day.
Thanks, guys.